In this lesson, we're going to be solving one-step equations. Example 1, how do I apply the properties of equality? So the first property we'll look at is the addition property. And what that states is that by adding a number to each side produces an equivalent equation. So for example, if we were going to be solving an equation like x minus 4 is equal to 10, to solve this, I would need to isolate the variable. And what I need to do then is what I do on one side, I must do on the other. And that addition property tells us that by adding the 4 to each side, we are going to remain an equivalent equation. So the subtraction property. The subtraction property of equality states that by subtracting a number to each side produces an equivalent equation. So for example, I could have x plus 8 is equal to 10. And so in order to solve this one, I need to isolate that variable by undoing that 8. And undoing that 8, I would subtract it. And as long as I subtract it from both sides, this property says that we will have an equivalent equation. All right, our multiplication property, then that one states that by multiplying a number to each side is going to produce an equivalent equation. So for example, I could have something like x all over 3 is equal to 5. All right, so to undo, the x is being divided by the 3, so to undo the division, I need to multiply then. And as long as I do that on both sides, I'm not changing that value. And then the last property that we'll talk about here is the division property, which means that by dividing a number on each side is going to produce an equivalent equation. So for example, I could have 4x is equal to 12. Well, to isolate that variable, again, I'm going to divide, and I have to do that on both sides. All right, so now let's apply those properties by solving these equations. All right, so I'm going to start by looking at, I have negative 7 is equal to 9 plus w. So I need to isolate that variable. So I need to undo this 9 by subtracting a 9 on both sides. And that's going to leave me with a w. And then I'm going to have negative 7 minus 9, or plus negative 9, is going to equal to negative 16. Our next one. I have m minus 15 is equal to negative 27. So what I'm doing here then is I need to isolate the variable by applying that addition property. So by adding the 15 on both sides, it's going to cancel out. And I'm going to have m is equal to then negative 9. All right, letter C, we have negative 5w is equal to 55. And now because this negative 5 is multiplying the variable, we're going to divide by negative 5 on both sides. And then we're going to have w is equal to negative 11. For number 4, we have negative 8 is equal to w divided by negative 4. Remember, when a number is being, or a variable is being divided, that we undo that by multiplying. And so we're going to multiply both sides by a negative 4 so that we can isolate that variable. And then these cancel out. And I'm going to have w is equal to positive 32. All right, for number 5, we have negative 1/3 times m is equal to 8. All right, and so since the negative 1/3 is multiplying the variable, we're going to divide. And remember that dividing a fraction is the same thing as multiplying by its reciprocal. So right here, I think the better way to do this then would be to multiply All right, example number 2, how do I solve two-step equations? All right, solving two-step equations, we are also going to be isolating the variable, just like we did with the one-step equations, and we're going to be isolating the variable by undoing the things around the variable. And so when we're undoing the things around the variable, we are undoing the order of operations. And remember with the order of operations that we always multiply and divide before we add and subtract? Well, because we're undoing them, we will undo the addition and subtraction before we undo the multiplication and division. So if I come here and I draw my line down, I also like to look at it as what's further away from that variable. And it's almost like you're kind of peeling away the things trying to get down to the variable y. And so I would start by undoing the addition and subtraction. So I'm going to subtract a 2 on both sides. And I'll have 9y is equal to 27. And now I'm looking and I have the 9 is multiplying, so to undo multiplications, we divide by 9. And then y is going to be equal to then 3. All right, and so we're going to check just a couple of these. We won't check all of them just for purposes of time. But so now if y is 3, I should be able to plug it in my equation here. Times 3 plus 2, is that equal to 29? So it's 27 plus 2 equal to 29. And yes, 29 is equal to 29. And so you know you got the right answer. All right, so for our next one then, we have 10 is equal to negative 3x plus 8. Again, we're isolating the variable by undoing the things around it. So we're going to start by then adding the 8. To undo the subtraction, we add an 8. All right, now we have 18, and that's equal to negative 3x. Because the negative 3 is multiplying the variable, we're going to divide by negative 3 on both sides. And then x is going to be equal to then negative 6. And again, if I went up top here and I were to plug it in here, negative 6, so I'd have negative 3 times negative 6 is negative 18. I'm sorry, 18. 18 minus 8, that would give us 10, and we know that we'd have the right answer then. All right, number 3, we have negative 17 is equal to m divided by 3 plus 9. All right, so start by drawing our fence down, and we're going to undo the minus 9 by adding 9 on both sides. And that will give us a negative 8, then is equal to m divided by 3. Now we need to isolate the variable, and that 3 is dividing the m, so we're going to multiply by 3 on both sides. And then m is going to be equal to negative 24. All right, and so let's go back and let's just double check that. So if I have a negative 24 right here, negative 24 divided by 3 is negative 8, and negative 8 minus 9 is negative 17. All right, number 4, we have 3 minus x is equal to 15. All right, so I'm going to start here, and now this is a positive 3, so to undo the positive 3, we're going to subtract. And I have negative x is equal to then 12. Now, we don't want to be left with a negative x, so I'm going to place a 1 right here so that I can then divide it by a negative 1. And so I will take then negative 1 divided by negative 1, and then x is equal to then negative 12. And for number 5, it's written 2x all over 3 plus 4 is equal to 10. I think the best way to do this one, to leave it so it's not so confusing, is we can rewrite this as 2/3 x plus 4 is equal to 10. And so when we do that, now we can subtract our 4, and I'll have 6, and then I have 2/3 x. Now, the 2/3 is multiplying the variable, so we're going to undo it by dividing, and dividing a fraction is the same thing as multiplying by its reciprocal. All right, so we're going to have x is equal to 18 all over 2, and 18 divided by 2 then is 9.